we're live, Vic. Let me get you in here. Hi, Chris. Hi, Shell. Davies. Hello from Scotland. Welcome. Street Knowledge is here. Reed, nice one. Who's that guy? 5:28. I think we get started. So, welcome, Vic.
Thank you.
So,
for having me.
I'm really happy that you even came early, so we could start early. I can do other things later this evening. I'm actually pretty busy because I work for myself, and my daughter is just recently started grade 9, but I'm homeschooling her. I'm an atheist homeschool dad who teaches evolution. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Yeah.
That is, I don't hear about many of those.
I know, I'm very unique. So if there's any Christian homeschoolers who's going to listen to this replay, just know that there's some homeschooling dads out there.
I was homeschooled for, until 6th grade, and then sophomore year of high school. So I know all about that life.
Yeah. I'm trying to get my daughter to like interact with the humans. And so that's a challenge. Okay. So while we were setting up, we talked a little bit. First of all, let me tell everybody how I found you. Actually, you found me. I just minded my own business one day, and then I checked my email, and here's a message from a guy named Vic. And let me see. I kind of purposely forgot some of the things you told me because I wanted this to be fresh for the interview. But basically, you said something like that you are a recent deconverted Christian. You used to be a Christian. You now call yourself an agnostic atheist. And but I'm not to blame for that, right? Or am I sort of to blame for that? Or it's not my fault you're not a Christian anymore, right?
No, it was basically, it was a host of a lot of different factors in my life. But no, you were basically just kind of like helped cement some of that stuff. But it just helped. Like a lot of the conversations that I had, or a lot of the conversations that I watched on YouTube were really helpful in just seeing the differences between like the Christian worldview, no matter which flavor of Christian, as opposed to just a non-religious or a atheist agnostic position. And I just could see that there was just a lot more reasonability and just rationality on that.
So basically you watched a lot of YouTube videos, you probably did some reading, and over the course of, so if I would ask you in January of this year, are you a Christian, you would have answered?
I would have answered, I'm having some serious doubts. And it's interesting because I was actually still attending church, and I was I was like a worship leader in youth group, like junior high school. So I was still doing that about 6 months ago, that was up until May. So I was really wrestling. And then I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't.
So as of May of this year, you were on stage as a worship leader?
Yeah. It was like, it was a new church plant in the area. And so I was up in front of, middle school, high school age kids, and playing and singing and doing that whole thing. And it was kind of just going through the motions. It wasn't at a certain point, in those months, I was just really going through all those doubts, and I was just like, this just isn't making sense to me,
I used to be a worship leader too. Well, kind of.
Oh, yeah?
I was on the worship team. Not a leader. But So if you have a guitar behind you or in the room or in the house somewhere, maybe later on we can close the show with singing How Great Thou Art together.
I'd be able to do that.
But when we were about to come on, let me fix this. You told me, I asked if you were outed or how many people you've told, and you said you've just basically told your parents, and I was number 3 on the list, right?
Yeah, well, I kind of, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of people I've told. I've told my parents. I told my fiance. She was probably the first person who knew that I was really struggling. And then I had another friend of mine who I was talking to who was an agnostic, and then her parents, my fiance's parents, but they didn't know until just recently. Like my parents also didn't know until May that I was going through this, and I was literally just voicing some of the issues that I was having. I just told them I wasn't going to church really anymore, and I was having serious doubts. So,
Fiance, when are you getting married?
it's going to be May. I think it's May 4th is the date that we said. Next year, 2019.
Okay, so is she a Christian?
So she was at one point, but not for very long. She had doubts before I did, and this was maybe a year and a half ago. And then I started having my doubts, and then her doubts kind of came back, and there was a little bit of tension between us for a little bit there, maybe a few months. It wasn't very long. But I think because she had doubts before, she was more comfortable with the idea of having doubts. And then I kind of just progressed to the point where I was just like, I delved so deep into it because it had been such an integral part of my life for so long that I couldn't just ignore these things. I had to come to some conclusions. I had to figure this stuff out,
I can hear some Christians in the chat right now audibly, and and they're screaming right now. Doug, PineCreek, Doug, you often give Christians a hard time when they become a Christian because you ask questions like, was your fiance or was your wife a Christian? Just like Lee Strobel, his wife became a Christian, and then sure enough, 2 years later he did. And so, to be consistent, PineCreek, shouldn't you ask Vik if the fact that his fiance started to doubt before him, that this is the real reason he's an agnostic atheist today?
No, I don't think that's the case at all. I think I was in talks with. Obviously, I was watching a lot of these debates and discussions online, and a lot of that just seeing the two different perspectives really illuminated a lot of that for me.
Like what exactly about the perspectives? Like, for example, do you remember any videos I've done that you watched?
I remember like the videos you did with like Mike Winger. That was kind of more recently. Because I remember my dad had sent me some sources to like help me stop doubting, and some of it was Mike Winger's stuff.
Oh, really? Okay, so you're watching me and Mike Winger, and what about that interaction impacted you?
I would probably say just the fact that like you can tangibly see that there's unfalsifiable belief on the Christian side that like you clearly don't have. Like you're just trying to look at the issues, and you're not trying to insert this assumption of a God at any particular point. And he's very often doing that, and he's expecting you to be doing that as well. And all of his definitions are kind of rooted in that, when they don't necessarily have to be. He just keeps pushing that onto you or anybody else who didn't think like him, which is what most theists would do, but
Yeah, I kind of get that feeling as well with a lot of people, a lot of Christians I talk to, that the default position is that God exists and this God happens to be the God of the Bible, and I'm going to continue to believe it until someone proves otherwise. And I think the more, and I'll use the word honest, the more honest position is to say, maybe this God exists, maybe he doesn't, or it doesn't. Maybe some other God exists. Why don't we just see if we can figure this out together and look at what reasons we have?
yeah. And that just seemed like a way more just fair-minded, even-handed, reasonable stance to take when there's just so much unknown in an area like this, like in an area of study like this. And I didn't see theists being reasonable. I mean, I don't know, this might upset some people in the chat. I don't know how many ardent atheists you have in the chat, but like I see the ardent belief in God, that absolutely there is a God and there's no doubt about it, as difficult as untenable as a position as there is absolutely no God. I can't see how either position can be come to like rationally. Like there has to be some doubt in there, and there's so much unknown. There's quite a bit of ego in that to say something like that, to claim something like that, something like that. That's not a part of your epistemology. You're not being reasonable.
I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a Christian watching this now, and so some of them might be asking, what type of Christian were you? You probably were. You didn't know the real Jesus. If only you knew who Jesus really was, you wouldn't be in this position today. Did you ever really experience the love and the grace of Jesus? Because it's obvious to me, i.e. the Christian, that you didn't. How would you respond to something like that?
I mean, I could give my testimony if that would if that would work. I mean, I did the whole thing. I mean, my whole life I was a Christian, and I know that there was a large portion of my life where I didn't really pursue God. I didn't really go out, like I didn't. I mean, I might have had a head knowledge of what it was to be a Christian, but I didn't really pursue it with my life. Like my actions didn't show it, and I'm sure many Christians would agree with that, depending on what their faith journey was like. It wasn't until I was maybe 17 or so that I actually had an experience in church during worship where I was on my knees, kind of like bowing before. I felt like I was like bowing before the throne of God type thing. And then I almost, if I remember correctly, like it felt like the hand of God was on me, like God's actual hands were on me. Like I felt that, like physically.
You were how old? 17?
Yeah, like the presence was like so strong, and that was my actual experience. Like not every Christian has an experience, obviously. Some Christians never have an experience, but I actually had an experience during worship, and I couldn't speak for like the rest of the night after that. And that was at like a church retreat, and then after that, there was like a 180 flip for the most part. I mean, there were some habits that here and there, like some sinful habits here and there that I didn't shake completely, which that's not to be expected of every single habit that you have. But a lot of things changed, and like my perspective completely changed. Like Jesus was everything to me. And having a relationship with him and making sure that I understood what he wanted and expected of me was paramount in my life. And that became my central focus, was pursuing Jesus and not being worldly and rejecting worldly things in my life, and like disassociating with worldly things.
What some Christians might be asking in their heads, were you're a Protestant, I'm assuming. Mm-hmm. What denomination?
So 11 years or so. Well, let me back up. when I was homeschooled, like from a young age, I went to like a Calvary Chapel church in
Oh,
Southern California.
I went to a Calvary Chapel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's kind of like, I think that was one of the first churches, if not the first church that like my family got plugged into. And so I was part of like the homeschool group at a Calvary Chapel church in Southern California. And I was part of that for a while, and that was kind of like my formative years. And then when I was maybe like 10 or 11, I joined like a liberal Calvinist church. Like my family started attending a liberal Calvinist church. So like Amiraldism, it's like 4-point Calvinism essentially. And we started going there, and they claimed to not be legalistic, but it was like a watered down form of legalism. Like they talked about legalism, they acted legalistic in a lot of ways, but they weren't like ardent Calvinists. Like they weren't 5-point Calvinists. So
Okay.
I was there for maybe 11 years, and then my whole family left that church. We went to a different church that was kind of like they were an evangelical church, but they were kind of relaxed on a lot of these doctrinal issues. They weren't. They were more just like about like inclusiveness and like the love of God and being focused on that. I'm not sure if they really defined themselves. I think it was more like non-denominational, which, funnily enough, the 4-point Calvinist church also defined themselves as non-denominational on paper, but
Let me ask you
really
this.
they held it for them. Yeah.
Because I know I have a friend named Chris who's a Calvinist, 5-point. And he would ask you, he asks all apostates this, I think, which he would consider you, that what is the gospel? Like, it's obvious Vik really doesn't understand the gospel. And I hate to put you on the spot, but how would you answer that? Like in a couple senses. I'm not asking for a big hermeneutic type response, but
Yeah.
how did you see the gospel?
I mean, basically just like the John MacArthur explanation of what the gospel is. Like, essentially you're laying down your life for Christ, in the same sense that he lays down his life for you. And you're completely committing yourself to him. You're completely rejecting worldliness. It's very like early Christian, like ascetic type of view.
But yet it's all grace at the same time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was hilarious. I never understood that completely, like how it could be. I mean, I believed it. Like I believed that it was all grace, and that like they held to the fact that like God did all that. Like they still, like the church really still held to the idea that God was the one that was moving you to salvation, and you didn't do that on your own. But yeah, it's essentially this idea that Jesus is he's the only sacrifice that is the worthy sacrifice that is remission of sins, and you need to believe in him. You need to repent and believe in him, and that is the only avenue towards salvation. It's not going to happen in prosperity gospels. It's not going to happen in Pentecostalism or any other form of heresy, by their standards. And it's only through Jesus. But
Hang on, I'm hearing from the judges right now. Yes, that's the correct answer. So you did know the gospel.
yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
here we have a situation where I think to me it sounds like, just after briefly knowing you, you had a pretty good grip of Christian theology and so forth.
Yeah.
You had this personal experience when you were 17. You've been in 3 different types of churches. You have a pretty broad-based view of Christianity. You start watching, reading, listening to stuff. Things are not adding up. you leave Christianity. Now, I want to get more into the emotional side of it, because for me, it was quite devastating to my wife, who's still a believer, and my family. What has their response been to you? Have they sort of said, hey, we love you, Vik, no matter what? Have they, every time they see you, do they bring it up? Is it something you just keep quiet? What's going on?
Well, I mean, well, I since I live in South Carolina now, like I moved away about a year or so ago, so I haven't seen them that much. Like I've only really interacted with my like my parents, and I mean they're Christian conservative evangelicals. So, I mean, my dad had the typical response that I would have imagined when I told him that I was just having some doubts and that things weren't adding up. And he asked me what those doubts were, and he was really concerned. Like he was really concerned that I wasn't going to church, and I brought up just a lot of the passages that were in brackets, in the Bible now, like how we've found out that certain passages aren't supposed to be in there. Right. Like, and that really bothered me, like from a inerrancy perspective, like
did your dad even know what they were?
Yeah, I don't think to be honest with you, I don't think my dad knew about those until I brought him up. Like, but I mean, it didn't really shake his faith, which wasn't really surprising to me. But he at first, like the first conversation that I had with him, it was cordial. It was more just me kind of voicing what I was going through and just the things that I was discovering.
But your parents are not like crying at night that you're going to hell, or are they?
I don't really know. Like they haven't really told me what they're emotionally, if they're crying necessarily, but my dad has told me that he feels like really sad about it, and he's told me that like I'm like a lost fool, like I sound like a lost fool. Yeah.
Oh wow. Do they think that you're going to start committing crimes now? Do you think they come from that perspective that because you're no longer a believer that you will actually, it puts yourself at greater risk of moral debauchery and chicanery?
I mean, philosophically, that's the thought, right? From the evangelical position, he might think that, but I don't know how many like atheists he actually knows, like personally, like that he has like a friendship with or any sort of personal relationship with, to be able to make an assumption like that. I don't know. I mean, he might think that. I haven't really had conversation of what he really thinks about my life. Like if he thinks, but he definitely thinks that like it's dangerous. Like he said that it's dangerous that like trying to do life, like going into marriage without God would be a dangerous thing to do. He probably said at one point, like we've imparted like all this knowledge onto you, and it seems like you're trying to do it without God, and that's not a smart or very wise decision to make.
Yeah, I understand that sentiment. I think a lot of Christians think that when you leave Christianity, this is why they're so sad in the United States, especially, is because they honestly believe that if Christianity continues to decline, that morality will decline, the moral fabric will decline, there'll be more pedophiles, there'll be more abortions, there'll be all these bad things will happen when, even though the media is very selective in what they talk about, if you look at the statistics, things like violent crime and abortion are going down as Christianity is going down with it. So it's, I understand why parents feel that way, and they probably feel like they have disappointed Yahweh, disappointed Jesus, because it was their job as parents to bring you up in the way of the Lord, teach a child in the way they should go, and he shall never depart from me, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
How about, just briefly, did your friends, are they still with you? Have they kind of, your Christian friends, did they leave you? Are they still talking to you?
Um, to be honest with you, I mean, I've moved around from, to different churches here, throughout my life. And I didn't really ever feel like strong relationships with Christian friends, like any of my Christian friends, like that I had at any of those churches. It was almost like that was a necessity for the relationship. At least I got that sense. Maybe that wasn't necessarily the truth, but yeah, I don't know. I don't, when I left that liberal Calvinist church, I didn't get nobody reached out to me from that church except for somebody who also went through like a falling out with the leadership within like a month. Like nobody reached out to me in leadership or anybody that I'd ever known or talked to. I'd been at that church for 11 years. Nobody ever reached out to me. And so I was just like, I was really disappointed with just the way these types of Christians were acting. But that's not to say that all Christians, would act that way. I'm not like assuming that all Christians are going to act that way. So don't come after me.
Dan Simpson in the chat says, I can't wait to hear from someone who became an atheist because of an apologist. Dan, I'm not sure if you just got here, but Vik was saying that while watching me and Mike Winger, it's almost like, well, wait a minute. Mike Winger's an apologist, and it's like, it kind of didn't help you. But there's some interesting questions coming in the chat, but I don't know if I should ask them now or later. But I wanted to ask you, I think this is an interesting question. If you were to give advice to Christians listening on how to stay a Christian, can you think of some things not to do?
Sorry, rephrase that one more time.
What advice would you give Christians in what they should or shouldn't do in order to stay a Christian?
Should or shouldn't do in order to stay a Christian?
For example, would you say, if you're a Christian, don't watch PineCreek's channel if you want to stay a Christian? Like, is there certain books that you would say not to read? Or
I think I just inherently did that, like I just stayed away from that stuff because I just didn't think it was true. Like I didn't, you know what I mean? Like I would never read any of the books from the New Atheist movement because I just didn't think it was true. I didn't want to waste my time with that stuff, So, I mean, it's a tough question to answer, like try to stay a Christian. Like, I don't think Christians are really thinking about it that way. Like they just believe that they're right. Like I believed that I was right. Like I didn't think, oh, I need to avoid all of this stuff. If I heard an atheist say something, I just wouldn't agree with it. Like it wasn't about like, before I started really thinking about, the questions and the doubts.
Well, the reason why I asked you this question, because just yesterday I was lurking on a Facebook Christian group. Well, more than just lurking, I type things once in a while. And they were talking about apologetics and how some pastors are against it. Some pastors are actually against apologetics because they don't want Christians learning things and going too deep into things. I'm not joking around. They're actually talking this way. And they're saying, yes, for some people it's fine and it's not going to cause doubt. But for other Christians, like if they learn that the passage about the Samaritan woman, it was not actually in the old manuscripts and it was added like a couple hundred years later, that is going, for some people, that's like game over. It's like, but this is the word of God. And now I can't trust that everything in it is from the originals. Like for some, it's game over. Now for the Roman Catholics, that's nothing because they don't, for them it's about tradition and so forth. But that's why I asked that question. And a guy, Dean, who's an apologist and a pastor, he asked, did you read the book from Bart Ehrman, Misquoting Jesus?
I didn't read Misquoting Jesus yet, but I'm reading, and I'm trying to go like slow through Jesus Interrupted right now,
Okay.
which is awesome. Um, I'm just like, I'm reading it, and I'm just, like fumes, like just flames,
Yeah.
it's really hard to not be ticked off about a lot of the stuff that I didn't know about, and that just pastors don't tell you in church.
I'm working on a video right now, and I'm trying to figure out what to call it, because I was thinking about calling it things that pastors apologists don't tell you in church, or I've been thinking about entitling it a sermon you'll never hear in church, and like dress up in a tie and pretend I'm Pastor PineCreek giving a sermon, and then basically say all the things that they are terrified, and I'll use that word, they're terrified to say on a Sunday morning. They don't want their congregation to know certain things. Now, they might talk about it on a Wednesday night apologetic Bible study, but they know, a lot of them know, that there are people sitting in the pew that if they heard this stuff, it would cause some major angst in their life. There's a question in the chat about your upcoming wedding, and they were asking, do you think you're going to have a secular or a Christian wedding?
We're going to do a secular wedding. Just like, I don't think we've planned how it's going to go yet, but it's not going to be a religious wedding. Through the discussions that I've had with my fiance at this point, all the way up to this point, we've kind of decided together that it's not going to be religious. But interestingly enough, she didn't want it to actually be religious, even when she was a Christian. So that's interesting.
So are you foreseeing the word God and no prayer? And first of all, her parents are Christians, right? And usually
her parents, no, actually, her parents are both agnostic.
Oh, okay. And they're the ones paying, probably. Yeah. Okay, then you're good.
Probably.
I was going to say that if whoever's footing the bill is Christian, you're going to have to throw in a few Jesuses or gods in there once in a while, but just to keep them happy.
Right.
But if not,
thankfully, it's not the other way around. Yeah.
Let me take the atheist perspective now. Of some atheists spend a lot of time talking to Christians, and what kind of advice can you give atheists on how to better deal with conversations, either online or face to face? Things not to say, things to say, because you're fresh out of this. Everything's fresh in your mind.
Yeah.
Like, were there things that atheists said or did that just really ticked you off and kind of pushed you on the other side of the fence? And is there things that they said or did that you thought, oh, wow, this is great? Any advice you can give?
Well, just making sure that the way that you're saying things and the way, like your delivery, is in such a way that is just conversational, and it's not trying to invoke any sort of reaction, and it's not necessarily intended to attack any one person specifically, or Christians. I think a lot of Christians who really truly believe it, like at least in my case, like I believed it, and it was I'd been raised in this sort of belief system, and just having honest conversations about these things, but not in a way that was trying to, like, I didn't want to like destroying me, like I didn't want somebody to destroy me with atheistic arguments or something, like, you see a lot of that clickbait type stuff online.
Did you ever
having a real conversation?
Did you ever hear of street epistemology while you were a Christian?
I don't think so. A lot of the stuff that really started to get the wheels turning, I listened to a lot of Jordan Peterson last year, and that really actually started getting the wheels turning. just listening to that, a lot of his stuff. And then subsequently after that, hearing other debates like Matt Dillahunty was really instrumental. A lot of his debates and talks. I mean, he can, like, sometimes the way that he says stuff can be
off-putting.
You know, I can see how, you know, some Christians might take it the wrong way, but so for example, like, you know, any unfalsifiable belief or any like theistic assumption that I would have, one of the things that really got the wheels turning for me was like when, so like prayer, for example, like assuming like if something happens good, like something that I prayed for actually happens, right, in the world, and it's something that I would interpret as good as a Christian. How do I know for sure that that is something that God did, like with 100% certainty? And then how do I distinguish that from the Muslim who has the same unfalsifiable belief and fervent belief in their prayer and the power of their prayer, or a Hindu and the power of their prayer? Like, that was really powerful. Like, because I had no answer for that. Like, I couldn't.
Yeah, that's exactly what was one of the things that got me doubting in my mid-30s. Like, I've been an atheist for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years now. I was a deist for a year or two. But it was really just looking at myself in the third person perspective and saying, okay, here's my experience. Here's a Muslim or a Mormon's experience. How can I say one is better than the other? Just the experience. I'm not talking about textual stuff. Or how can I attribute that experience to my God in a reliable way compared to the Mormon or Muslim? And you really can't. Like, it's... And I get in trouble because I tell people forthrightly that your personal experience of your God is not possibly wrong. It's probably wrong. And they don't like to hear that, but you just look at all the spiritual, in quotes, experiences in the world, and it's like they can't all be right. And I think everybody agrees with that. But so...
It also depends on, like, too, like, if you're one, like a Christian that's coming from my sort of background, who believes that there's like, or who believed that there was like an absolute truth, like there has to be some sort of right answer here.
Yeah, you had high expectations of your God. It's like and when those expectations are not met, it's I totally get that. I think fundamentalists, more conservatives, are way more likely to leave religion than the more loosey-goosey liberal Christians, because it's, to them, it's just like, you know, anything that doesn't sound loving in the Bible, I just throw it away, and anything that makes Jesus sound good, I keep. And it's like, how do you challenge or have someone reflect critically on their beliefs when they're just flip-flopping in the wind?
Yeah, definitely.
When you were a Christian, did you believe in hell and in heaven? I'm assuming heaven, but did you believe in a literal hell that was a place that was very, very bad?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Are you ever worried that you're wrong and you might be going there?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's like it's going to be a permanent scar, like, on my psyche, because it was just hammered in at such a young age, you know, psychologically. It's really hard to shake something like that. Like, I feel like I need like some sort of therapy, like to be able to work through that. I don't know if it's ever going to completely go away. Like, I mean, how can it? Because I mean, it's an unfalsifiable belief. It's not something that's provable, and it could be real. I don't know.
Can I give you some hope? Because how old are you? You're
26.
You're 26. Okay.
Yeah.
I was a Christian for 30 years and had that version of hell pounded in me. But here's the hope. I got rid of it in probably in under a year. And so I'm not saying this will happen to you, but it could. And what really cemented it in my mind to get rid of that fear that was pounded into me for 30 years was to really look at, well, what if the Jews are right? And that, I think, is a brilliant way to look at it, because you were a person who worshiped Jesus, correct? As God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If the Jews are correct, you're an idolater.
Mm-hmm.
You are doing the worst possible sin. Christians, if you're listening, and if you're wrong and Jesus is not God and you're a Trinitarian, let me be very clear. If you're wrong, you are the worst person in the world in God's eyes, in Yahweh's eyes. You are purposely choosing to worship something that you call God, Yahweh, who's not God and Yahweh. You are in far worse shape than an atheist or a Muslim or a Buddhist, because you're purposely doing this. And so when you think of it that way, it's like, well, wait a minute. Even if I was a Christian, you should be fearing hell just a little bit because if Jesus isn't God, I think most Christians would admit to this. You're done if you're believing in the Trinitarian view of Christianity and a literal hell. Like you're in really, really rough shape here. But by having that perspective, it's like you go, wait a minute, do we have good reason to believe any of this is true?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you start doing some research in where the whole concept of hell came from and so forth, it kind of fizzles away pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I get to that place. I that makes total sense. Like, I mean, it's hard to, you just put the whole landscape of belief in front of you, and you're just like, well, okay, I mean, there's so many different ideas about the same exact thing. They can't all be right. And then there's a lot of good reasons to believe that none of it is right, and it's just ontology, So,
would you say that fear of hell is the hardest thing for you currently, or is there, like, do you miss not praying? Do you miss not going to worship service?
The hardest thing for me currently is just like swallowing the fact that a lot of it just isn't true, because truth was so important to me as a Christian, and it's still really important to me now, and that's why it's like I've kind of devoted myself to wanting to pursue truth, no matter what that truth is or where that truth takes me, like, if the truth is morals are nihilistic, and morals don't actually exist, and it's just a cultural creation and evolutionary creation, and that's just something that I have to accept, then that's just what I have to accept, like, so that was really hard because that was really scary, like, for me, like, just in the beginning, like, just having doubts and thinking about if that's possibly true, that scares me a lot. Like, not having God as a safety net. I don't know how to live like that. I've never lived like that before. Like, and that was just really hard, to come to terms with. Regardless of where the truth takes you, you have to pursue it boldly, and you have to be strong in that. You have to overcome all of those fears. You have to overcome yourself to pursue truth, even if you never get to all the truth that's out there. You have to keep striving towards it, no matter how lonely it is.
And being willing to change your mind on new evidence. I define truth as all those things learned by reliable methods that reflect reality. And sometimes, we think something is true, and it turns out that we're wrong. And sometimes we think we have a reliable method and we're wrong. Just being willing to say, you know what? Oftentimes humans screw up. We make mistakes, and the Bible's not immune to that. and that's where a lot of Christians would, draw the line. No, that's where you're wrong, Doug.
Right.
But I totally get what you're saying with that safety net, because I think for a lot of Christians, this is a big selling point. It's that no matter what, Jesus will never leave me nor forsake me. If I get terminal cancer tomorrow, I'll be able to go through it because of Jesus. Now, an atheist can't say that. An atheist can't say to a loved one who's dying, I will see you again in the afterlife, you know? And so I will, or they could, but they'd be lying. So I totally get the benefits of any theistic afterlife belief, that type of hope. But the flip side is, like, I don't know if this has happened for you, but for me, as soon as I left Christianity and became an atheist, I honestly believe I become a better father, in that I value every day more, because I realize how short life is, and that there is no guarantee of an afterlife, and that, you know, I look at my children differently. I look at my wife differently, my family and my friends, that this could be my last day, and I'm going to make the most of it. It basically has increased, for me personally, has increased the value of life. I find this world more valuable now that I've shed myself of this idea of eternal life. It's the law of supply and demand, right? Once you have a lot of supply, the price goes down.
Right.
So,
Right. It's like a more sophisticated philosophical position of YOLO.
yeah.
Almost.
There you go.
No, but yeah, no, there's plenty of like really good, like exactly what you just said that's definitely the positive element of it. That you, like, for me, like there's definitely like a heightened sense of like responsibility. Like things aren't going to happen unless I do them. Like that, like I almost felt like I could just wait around for the rapture, like to some extent. Like there wasn't much of a sense of I need to make something of myself. I need to make something of this life. You know, like I need to take advantage of what I have because it's all I've got. You know, like I thought, well, you know, I mean, I'm really not all that significant, and I struggle with a lot of like confidence issues too growing up, because I didn't really think it really mattered all that much to have a significant life as a Christian. It was just really about winning souls for the kingdom. You know, it's just you're just a foot soldier, you know, trying to win souls, and it's really about Jesus. It's not about you, you know?
So how do you view your fellow comrades now, your fellow mankind? Like before, when you're a Christian, it's like a soul needing saving. And sometimes they even call themselves a Christian. You had to convince them that they weren't first, so you could save them second, right? Isn't that how it usually goes?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now, like, I have some thoughts on this, but have you noticed in yourself how you treat people differently, if at all, or?
I mean, I had a general like proclivity to be just really nice to people, and I'm kind of like more shy and like reserved to myself kind of demeanor. But I don't have these unnecessary like ideological like beliefs that I need to hold to, and like I felt like I could never have like deeply strong relationships with non-Christians to the extent of that I could have with Christians, because they didn't believe the same. They weren't saved. They weren't really my brother or sister in Christ, you know? So I couldn't have that deep rooted relationship with somebody who thought differently, who didn't, who's, you know, who wasn't saved.
Yeah, I used to look at people. I used to look at people like you're either walking in the light or walking in the darkness, and there's no in between.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, that did quite a bit for me, because I just bit my tongue a lot of times, you know, when other people would talk about their philosophies or the way that they viewed life, because I just wanted to tell them how they should, not be thinking the way that they're thinking and thinking like how God is thinking, which is detailed in the Bible, and how they should be picking up their cross and following Jesus, and that's really the only thing that should matter to them ultimately. And yeah, so, I mean, I learned after a while that I couldn't be so I couldn't push those views onto people in conversation, all the time, because I wanted to do that. And I did that a lot. Like when I first became a Christian, and I lost one of my I fell out of contact with one of my best friends. Well, he was my best friend in high school because I told him he wasn't really my brother. He's not my brother. You're not my brother in Christ. I mean, we're brother. We might be, friends or whatever in the earthly sense, but we're not brothers in Christ. So we don't have the deepest relationship we can have. And that really hurt him.
Yeah.
And rightly so. I feel horrible about that, even still today. I feel bad about the ways that I acted as a Christian.
You know how to fix that
because
though?
of these ideological. Sorry, go ahead.
The way you fix that, the way you make amends for that. First of all, you can go apologize, but you start a YouTube channel and you pay for your sins that way. That's why I'm here. Dean is a pastor apologist in the chat, and he's asking, what was the nail in the coffin for you? What was the last thing that you remember that you just kind of said, yeah, this is it. I'm done. I'm out of here with Christianity.
It was probably those several passages that are bracketed in the Bible. That was probably it. And just the fact that there was no after that, I was okay, there's no clarity or continuity in this Bible. The Bible was it for me. If that's not consistent, then what do we really have that's unchanging?
Yeah. I'm going to give you, this might be cathartic for you, because maybe, I don't know, do you feel you have some internal bitterness from all this stuff that your pastors and apologists and Christian friends didn't tell you? Is there a little bit of...
100%.
Okay, so
100%.
I'm going to let you unleash, and I'll help you because there's probably some things that we share in common, but what are some things you just wish Christians listening would know, and that you're mad that they lied to you about certain things or didn't tell you certain things? Go ahead, unleash.
Oh man, goodness. Just starting with the bracketed passages. Do
you remember
I don't know how you...
Yeah, let's get specific here. From the top of my, I'm trying to bring up something while we're talking, but from the top of my head, the passage about Jesus sweating blood, that was never in the original manuscript. The ending of Mark, there's actually several endings of Mark that are not in the older manuscripts, and the oldest manuscripts just have it as a cliffhanger of the women telling no one. What else?
The woman at the well.
Woman at the well never was in the oldest and most reliable manuscripts. What else?
Guys, there's 6 or 7 of them.
Oh, the Trinity passage. John, I got to bring it up. The Trinity passage, the big one in the Gospel of John, was never in the oldest manuscripts. Christians, I hope you're listening to this, and this should just, what we're telling you right now is true. You can look this up for yourself. And I'm trying to even find some Christian quotes while we're talking here, because they won't listen to atheists, but they will listen to a few Christian apologists who will admit this.
And that stuff is just undisputable. It's it was believed that was true for so long. Up until last 100 years or so, it was believed as absolute fact. All the way back since Athanasius or whatever, when he coined absolute inerrancy or whatever for the canon, and then all the way up until then, and then they find out that, hey, these aren't actually present, these stories aren't present in the earliest manuscripts that we have, and then so now we have to bracket this because we don't know if it's actually true. That was I mean, that really hurt when I found that out, because I didn't know that in all those years until, gosh, within the last 6 or 7 months. And so that was completely new information to me, and that's because it's not talked about in church. Like it wasn't. I mean, pastors are don't bring that up from the pulpit, and my question, your guess is as good as mine as to why that is. I just ask, why is that? Why are we not bringing up the weaknesses? Why aren't you, if you're honestly pursuing truth, why aren't you weighing both sides of the argument and saying, okay, well, here are the reasons to believe, here are the reasons not to, or the reasons for and the reasons for against. And
well, putting aside even,
and we just need to be honest.
Putting aside and this, I'll give my opinion, putting aside the absolutely horrendous and terrible epistemology for believing an incredible claim of a man rising from the dead on solely the basis of a book 2,000 years old, putting all that aside, what about things like pastors not telling the flock that, no, these are probably not written by eyewitnesses, not even two of the Gospels.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. As soon as I started just looking into scholarship stuff, I mean, like I said, I'm reading 2 books right now, actually. A Marginal Jew by John Muir, who's a fantastic Catholic scholar from Notre Dame, and then Jesus Interrupted by Bart Ehrman, which a lot of evangelicals don't really like Bart Ehrman all that much. Like, maybe his delivery is not always the best.
No,
like we were talking about earlier.
It's not his delivery they don't like. I'll tell you exactly why Christians don't like Bart Ehrman. Because he's effective. Because
he's effective. Sure.
He's causing kids to go to hell. That's why they don't like him. If he was ineffective, almost anything he says, they wouldn't really care. The fact that he actually is changing people's minds, and people like you, why didn't I know this stuff? And again, for liberal Christians, for Roman Catholics, it has no effect. For Christians who just want to talk about love, it has no effect. But for Christians who actually value this thing we call truth, and wanting to know, is this evidence reliable, this stuff matters. And Bart has a way of just, depends on what gospel you read. That phrase alone, and the whole idea of reading the gospels in parallel instead of up and down.
Yeah, historical critical method.
Yeah, that alone has caused a lot of Christians to, if not leave Christianity, doubt it seriously.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I started reading that book, and I started just doing that myself, doing the historical critical method myself. He's like, it's very simple. Like, you don't have to be like a genius scholar to just compare these stories side by side. I mean, you have multiple different accounts of the same event, and like the resurrection story, like how many, what did they actually see there? How many women went? How many angels? Like 1 angel, 2 angel. But what is it that they actually saw? What was the tomb actually empty to begin with? Like, there's so many things that we don't know. And then the earliest account, which is Mark.
You're gonna love this. I'm going to give you, this will help you vent. This is a sneak peek of my upcoming video. I shouldn't do this, but what you were just talking about with Mark, let's see if I can find it. Like this, the narrative of Mark went from just a few, the women at the tomb.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff in red is just found in Mark, and Mark is the first gospel written. By the time you get to John, look at all the stuff that's added. Now, I'm not asking you to read it. Just look at the colors. No. Like, you go from this is the women going to the tomb narrative scene, and the core essence of the information in red is from the first gospel. And by the time you get to the last gospel, you got all that stuff. And And some of this you can harmonize it, but I tell you, you're just pulling out your hair too. And you have to admit at a certain point that you want this to be true so badly that you'll try any way possible to make it fit.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's really, really just disappointing. Looking at that, like how much was added, how much was changed, and like that's the other thing too. Is it's like the views had to change. Like from the earliest beliefs. I don't doubt that like the well, maybe I do. I doubt it all, but the earliest accounts or the earliest Christologies and understandings of Christ, they probably believed that Jesus actually rose from the dead. But what that meant, the significance of that, how that affected their Jewish belief, was very different. By the time you got to whatever Greek Christian was writing John, that Greek Christian who's writing John had a very different view. And by the time he's writing John, he can't use the apocalyptic prophet view anymore, in his writings. So,
yeah, and
there's so much.
This is one of my favorite quotes from Christian N.T. Wright. I don't know who the gospel writers were, nor does anyone else. Likewise, I don't know when or where they wrote the gospels. And despite 200 years of scholarship, nor does anyone else. When people will tell you, oh, Matthew was written 85 AD in Syria, but we don't know that. That's a quote from Christian N.T. Wright from one of the videos I watched him. Not from a book, I don't think. But yeah, it's... things that Christians don't know is even purposeful changing of the text. Not only just adding things later, but taking things from the Old Testament and changing it to as propaganda to fulfill a certain agenda. And Paul does that a lot.
Right.
I'm going to see if I can find an example here.
Yeah, there's that, and then. I think, another thing was just like just so many different views of, what Son of God meant, and just different Christologies over the first 3 centuries, and the different Christian understandings of it. And they all thought that their views were perfectly in line with the Bible, especially when you got to like, the Council of Nicaea, early 3rd century, you have Arius's view, you have Alexander's view, and they both thought that their views were perfectly biblical. There was nothing in it that they thought was, particularly heretical. But then you end up putting 2 people who are completely convinced that their views are biblical, that, side by side each other. That's why they end up having the Council of Nicaea. Like, we have to iron this out. Like, we can't go on, this looks really, I'm not going to say it looks really bad, but like, you have to come up with an orthodox view, right? And you have to pick one. They can't both be true. So in wanting to be consistent, they had to have a vote, and ended up being Alexander's view that they picked. But.
Yeah, it's, and the Roman Catholics are not even off the hook, because the whole idea of who wrote the Gospels, they rely on Eusebius, who relies on Irenaeus, who quotes Papias, who we don't have any writings of. And Papias says he got it from a guy named John the Elder, who we really don't know who that is, who said that so-and-so, that Matthew wrote Matthew, Mark wrote Mark. Like, this is like Eusebius talking, in the 4th century, 5th century. It's... Yeah. When you look at this objectively and you got no skin in the game, and it's not like you're worried about your eternal salvation, and you're just looking at this, you're saying, come on, really? Really? Come on, Christians, really? You believe Matthew wrote Matthew, Mark wrote Mark because of this guy named Papias, who we have no writings of, who was quoted from a guy named Irenaeus, who we have a few writings of, who is quoted from a guy named Eusebius, who's basically we have the writings of, and Papias' source, we really don't know who that is. And really?
Yeah, and it's like this is the foundation of Christianity. Like this is it. All of what you just said. And that's really frustrating. That was really frustrating to start. Like this, just the more that I started reading, the more light, the more light was shed on all of this stuff. I was like, I can't do this. I don't know how I would be able to continue on with knowledge like this, like in being a worship leader and being in church and all of that. It just wasn't doable for me. Maybe it is for some people. I don't know, like some pastors or priests who are relying on that for
But this is how
their income.
This is how a lot of Christians respond to guys like you and me right now. They say, but so and so, he's really smart and he's looked into this and he says this, so I don't have to think about it anymore. I'm good to go. My hero, Christian apologist, fill in the blank, has looked into this. And if he's confident it's true, then I can be confident it's true. I can't spend the time reading all this stuff myself. And so I'm going to trust this expert. And and there's some validity to this. There's at some point we don't have access to the manuscripts like you and I, although a lot of it was online nowadays. But the problem is, this is my big beef with apologists and pastors, is that they're purposely not telling when their belief is going against the consensus and when it's not. And that is what bothers me. So when I hear a guy like J. Warner Wallace, the detective for Christ or whatever, case for Christ, say, all the Gospels were written before 70 AD, I would appreciate it if he would say, but you know what? The majority of the mainstream scholars disagree with me. Yeah. And if they are, and this is another thing I want J. Warner Wallace, if he has the gonads to do it, is to stand up in front of his flock and say, and if they are right and I am wrong, I need to leave Christianity tomorrow because I'm basing, as a detective, all this on the trustworthiness of the eyewitness accounts, which are no longer trustworthy if they are right. Because all these eyewitnesses would have been dead by then, or most likely. Yeah. And so if he would come out and say that, I would say respect to you. But he doesn't.
Yeah, my dad actually, I think my dad had actually emailed J. Warner Wallace.
To help save you?
Yeah, to some degree, yeah. I think this was maybe like a month ago or a couple weeks ago. I think one of his interns responded. He didn't actually respond, but and just sent back like a couple of long response emails.
I'm smiling because I've had this is like deja vu. I've had this conversation with a young woman named Rachel, who earlier this year left Christianity, or was this last year? I forget. Last year. And the same thing happened to her. Her parents contacted an apologist out of Canada. What was his name? I forget. And he actually sat down with her and they had a chit chat. And who knows, maybe you'll get to sit down with J. Warner Wallace if your parents make a big enough donation. But
oh gosh.
Yeah.
It's sad. I don't know. I mean, no, I to be honest, like I feel because I feel for the religious parent who's going through that, because like I have another friend who went through the same experience, who I think, I mean, it might not be, my experience might not be as hard as his, but like in the entirety of his family are Christians, and his dad has really wrestled with a lot of this stuff, but it's like his dad is really honestly wrestling and having doubts, whereas like a person like my dad is not really having doubts at all. So like there's different types of people, and I understand, because it's like you've done a lot of what you would interpret as work, as a parent, in trying to raise your kid in that and make sure that they have a firm foundation in the gospel and Jesus, and in your faith-based worldview. But yeah, it's actually possible to live without any of that stuff.
If there's any other Christians in the chat asking questions, now's your time, because I don't want to go too much longer. We've already been going an hour. So Dean, if you have any other questions, if you want to save Vik, here's your chance. Tell Vik, Dean, Joe, I know Joe's a Christian in the chat. Any other Christians? Here's your chance. We will honestly listen to your concerns, your questions, your comments. Why Vik should reconsider. I could actually role play as a Christian, and you would know the difference. And I could try to bring you back to Jesus if you want me to.
Yeah, I mean, I could do it too. You know.
I know it's like it is. If I've been doing interviews for a while now, and I tell you, you ask a Christian to role play as an atheist, and they really struggle. Some of them won't even do it because they think it's a sin to. But to ask a Christian like you and me, a former Christian like you and me, to role play back to the days when we were a Christian, yeah, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago for me either, so
it's fresh in your
fresh.
mind. Yeah. But Vik, you remember, you told me, Vik, that at 17 years old, you experienced something. Why are you throwing it all away when that was so real? Like, are you saying that it couldn't have been Jesus who touched you and that caused your mouth to be shut for the rest of that day? How do you explain that, Vik? And Vik, are you telling me that something can come from nothing? Like, what? That's silliness, Vik. There has to be a God. You know the basis of morality is in your heart, and you know it can only come from an objective source named God. Mm-hmm. Why are you purposely rebelling, Vik?
Yeah.
How was that for a shotgun?
It's like, oh, well, let's pick a topic and then we can expand on that. Yeah, no, I mean, for the religious experience, I mean, I just put that in the category of all the other religious phenomenology. It's like, well, I mean, how do we differentiate that from any Muslim who has the truest and most genuine, what they would call most truest and genuine experience of a deity? But I mean, there's no way for us to test that. There's no way for us to measure that outside of personal experience, you know. And then you put a person into a culture and a tribe or a group that is also all experiencing that around them, and then also attributing that to this specific deity. It causes way more confusion than clarity as to what's actually happening there. It could be pointing to just that, you know, we have the capacity for experiencing some sort of mystical experience or religious phenomenology that we categorize as religious, and it's just, you know, you could get the same experience from great music or psilocybin or whatever.
You know what? That's a great answer. What I would recommend for you is, if you're searching for community as well, you get a 2-for-1 deal here. But there's a way to interact with Christians that I've found effective, not so much with apologists or pastors, because they don't like to reflect much, but with the average Joe Christian, asking questions of them back that get to how they would test if something's true or not. So if a Christian was to come up to you tomorrow after listening to this live stream and via email or whatever, and say, but this experience you had at 17, a lot of Christians are going to go immediately there. That experience you had at 17, that had to be from God. Like, why are you poo-pooing that? I would say, ask a very simple one-sentence question back at them and just say, well, are all experiences like that of God? They will say no. Then you just ask, how would we test which ones are from God and which ones aren't? then they'll.
Or how do we test which version of God, or if it's the Muslim God or Jewish God?
I wouldn't even go that far that quick, because you'll spook them. They're like, some Christians like deer in the headlights. It's like.
Oh yeah.
So you assume their worldview is true to begin with, but you just ask them. Surely not all Christians who say they've experienced Jesus actually did. How would we figure out which ones are true and which ones aren't? And they will struggle with that. They could say something, well, if it aligns with Scripture or not, but even then, that could, it could still align with Scripture, but it might not be an experience from the Holy Spirit, right? And so this line of Socratic questioning is called street epistemology, which I mentioned earlier, and it is. Yeah. And I mentioned Rachel earlier too, and she's been dialoguing with her parents, and she's been doing this quite effectively, and it's really got her parents to think, and
right.
and it kind of lowers the defenses a little bit, because you're not saying that they're wrong. What you're doing is you're just well, how would you, like, if we both value this thing called truth, how would we figure out if this is true or not?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's like like you were saying, like Socratic method. Like I think I became aware of that kind of after, when I was just naturally asking questions to Christians. Like I became of that, like that it was an actual thing. That like SE was a thing. After I was just already naturally doing that by just naturally trying to figure out what was going on, and in the discussions that I had with my dad, I was just asking those types of genuine questions, like, well, like, how do I know? Like and that was what really got me doubting to begin with, was how do I know that I actually know that was from God? How do I know that this experience was legitimate? Because there's lots of Christians that don't value that sort of experience. They don't think that sort of experience is reliable, and they think that you should only be relying on the propositional belief statements rooted in Scripture. Like when I was at the liberal Calvinist church, they didn't encourage experience and having experiences. Like that was more of a liberal thing, and they didn't. That was not at all something that they would have considered as good criterion for believing someone saved or not.
You're right. That those types of comments would come from a touchy-feely type Christian, but the more evidential type Christian, they're going to ask you, well, Vik. There's a guy named Joe in the chat, but they would say, Vik, you just stop trying. Like, there are good answers to your questions, to your concerns about those bracketed things and so forth. Like Vik, none of that impacts the truth of the core of Christianity. Like, Jesus still rose from the dead for your sins. If you would have gone to such and such a person or read such and such a book, you might have turned out differently. Like, why did you give up so quickly? Like this is the way I know them like the back of my hand. This is the way they'll approach you. And I guess, and I have no problem with that, as far as, have you read such and such, but it still boils down to the core epistemology of, do we say we know something with a high degree of confidence based on such types of evidence? And and when you put it in a different setting, like I have a friend named Pete. He rose from the dead 3 days ago. Do you believe me? No. Why not? Well, I need some evidence. Well, if I have a diary where I said that on the day I wrote that he rose from the dead. Would you take that? No. What if I had 12 friends who also had diaries and I told them would you accept that? No. It's like there's this inconsistent epistemology that in any other book, in any other realm of the world, they wouldn't buy it. But when it comes to the belief system they were raised in, oh yeah, this makes sense to me.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and there's so many different complicated reasons as to why that is that they're holding to that specific thing. Like we talked about, like the safety net, like, I guess like one of the things that I've like kind of like learned is that there's just like some people that just desperately need God. Like it doesn't matter.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the Bible is not completely inerrant. It doesn't matter if we can't distinguish a reliable epistemology. They just need this idea, you know, because it's so foundational to their mental stability and
That
emotional stability.
that is a very astute observation, and I struggle with that because I know that there's people who, shall I say, call them fence-sitting Christians who watch my YouTube channel, but some of them have a really sucky life, and
Mm-hmm.
and I worry, okay, is it sometimes okay to believe false things? Now, I don't know the answer to that one. I actually think sometimes, but very, very small percentage of the time, that maybe it is okay if it means that you'll live.
Mm-hmm.
You can think of examples of a child dying of a bad disease, and there's an antidote, a cure, but they refuse to take
Right.
it. And for some reason, it's like all you have to do is tell them that this is actually just chocolate cake, and then now they believe that it's chocolate cake, but it's actually the thing that will save their life. Is there times where I don't know? It's I struggle with this, and like
Yeah.
we were talking about Mike Winger earlier, and someone a few days ago asked me, "Would Mike Winger ever leave Christianity?" I said no, and
I wouldn't want him to either, to be honest.
yeah, well, I don't know him that well, but from the conversations I had with him and from what he's told me, it sounds like he really, really, really needs it.
Yeah. And I know that might sound bad too, like to some Christians, like they might be offended by that statement, but it's like,
That's okay. I'm being honest. Like if
yeah,
they're offended by my honesty, so be it.
yeah,
But I'm calling it as I see it, and I see a lot of Christians really needing it.
yeah,
And if there's a Christian who thinks that they would become a nihilist and off themselves if they left Christianity, then I'm going to encourage them to be the best Christian they can be.
is that's the interesting thing too, though, about this. I don't know. I mean, this might spawn another hour conversation, but like, I actually the place that I'm at now is more moral nihilism. Like I've kind of moved to that position, but that hasn't really changed my actions at all. Like, um, and I'm still basically the same person. I just don't have those Christian beliefs, restrictive beliefs, and I'm still a responsible person. I'm still an upstanding person. I'm going to get married soon. Like, and none of that, none of my understanding of morals or my thinking that it ultimately is just self-created, self-generated, doesn't exist as something that exists within God's nature, is something that is real. It hasn't changed me in any sort of detrimental way as Christians would think.
Yeah, and you're right. We won't go deep into morality, but let me just say this. I think morality boils down to where the rubber hits the road and how you treat others. And a lot of how we treat others is based on facts. Like if it's a fact that if I take a knife and poke you with it deeply, that will cause you harm. And because of that fact, that paints a picture of what we should and should not do. If we have a shared goal that I don't want to die, I don't have someone poke a knife in me, and so maybe the other person doesn't want to either. Like the whole idea of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think evolution can explain that. I used to put up a chart of a rock, a leaf, a dolphin, a rat, and something else. And then I asked, what order would you destroy these things, and from least guilt to most guilt? and almost doesn't matter doesn't matter what culture you're in, what religion you're from. People tend to answer those questions the same. It's like, I have no problem destroying a rock, and then a leaf, and then maybe a rat, and then one of them was a butterfly, and then a dolphin last. And evolution explains this, that we tend to place more value on species closer to our own, and the goal is to expand that, and then more specifically not only the species but the tribe of our own. And this is why you see bigotry and racism and so forth, is because they're outside your tribe. And so the goal is to expand those tribes, and even expand the species that you value.
Yeah, absolutely. You said that you are homeschooling your kids. Could I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
Um,
I have just one of my kids.
Okay. Is there like tension in your household because you're trying to teach evolution? Like, is your wife Christian?
Yes.
So like, is there like tension in like the two different narratives? Like, is she trying to teach your kid?
If there is, I haven't heard anything recently, or when I say recently, like the last few years. My wife knows where I stand on that. My wife actually comes in. I'm in the kitchen area right now. My wife can come in and out and hear the things I'm talking about. I won't. In the early days, I would pull back when I see my wife is in the same room as me. Now I don't pull back at all. I'm totally okay with whatever she hears me say. This will sound really, really bad, but at some point, like if she has a problem with that, that's her problem. and if she's free to teach creationism to the kids, but my kids won't buy it. So it's like,
You've taught them well, Doug.
well, but my kids were actually, my oldest saw the process of me leaving Christianity and watched it happen. She was old enough at the time. And so now it's to the point where I'm not proselytizing to them. I'll basically say, you can go to church, you can believe whatever you want. But if you ask me why I believe what I do or what I don't believe what I do, I'll tell you. And like you, watching me and Mike Winger, they sit back and say, yeah, I can see that. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter especially likes the fact that I will say, I don't believe, I'm an atheist, but I'm willing to change my mind and give new evidence. If there's a God out there who wants to reveal himself to me next year, I'm open to that. Will I be 100% certain? No. But will it be enough to raise my confidence? I can think of some things that would.
That was like what you just said about the being open to changing your mind was a big part of it for me too. Like in hearing the two different perspectives.
Yeah.
Because there was one person who was adamant about not changing their mind at all. And then there was one person that was like, I'm not really sure, about this completely. Like I'm trying my best to navigate the arguments and the evidence, and I could be wrong about all of this. But I'm trying my best to pursue truth. And, if God is true, if God is real, then I will be a Christian. I will be convinced I'll be a Christian today. Like, that's so different. That's such a different methodology.
Yeah. In my experience, a lot of Christians don't like the language I use, because I don't refrain from using their language. I will say, I'm proselytizing doubt. That doubt's a virtue. And when I say doubt, I mean asking questions, being willing to change your views, given new evidence. I'm willing to seriously consider being wrong. And a part of me hopes I'm wrong because of my situation, my family, and same with you. Like, I think both of us are in a situation where our life would be easier if we could convince ourselves to believe it. But
oh yeah, it's not easy. Like this, it's become way harder for me to have to like establish my own, morals in my life and ethics. And like,
Yeah.
that's a really hard thing for me.
Well, for me, it's not so much the moral thing. I actually feel I become better in my actions towards my fellow man after I left Christianity, but that's maybe because I was a crappy Christian beforehand. But, but yeah, I think just the idea that like there's a lot of Christians listening who it just strikes fear and terror in them, just even imagining that what they believe might not be true. And that is why they're really not open to that reflection, that actually starting from square one and saying, okay, is this really true? What would change my mind? How many prophecies would I have to see fail before I stop saying prophecy is the reason why I believe? Maybe the mainstream scholarship is correct on a lot of these things. How does that affect my belief? Really, do we really know that something came from nothing and maybe there was eternal multiverses or whatever? Like, why am I choosing God over that? Just because it makes me feel good? Is it just because that gives me comfort? Maybe that experience I had in such and such a year wasn't from God. Can I come up with another explanation? Maybe. If I could, would that change my mind? Like, they need to have markers in their life, in my opinion, to show where they might change their mind. And I see a lot of Christians, they don't even attempt to put a marker in their life. And in my opinion, if you don't have those markers, you don't value truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And so once I started realizing that, especially like we were talking about like denominations a little bit earlier, but which denomination is true? Like how do we even sift through? How do we sort that out? Like, and there's no reliable epistemology for that. Like I talked to a really like progressive like pastor, like progressive, more left-leaning pastor. And he told me like, just go pick a different church, one that you like better. And I heard that and I was like, that made me really angry. I was like, you don't care about truth at all. If you're saying a statement like that, just go pick one you like it just anyone is going to do. Like, it just didn't make any sense.
It's called pragmatic Christianity.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
yeah. So, I mean,
I'm going to start the music here. I gotta wrap things up. Because you notice that while we've been talking, I've been getting darker.
I have, yeah.
That's because the sun's going down. But let me,
yeah.
But let me double check the chat. I first got to do something here. And see if there's any last minute questions. You got 2 minutes, guys, to answer questions. Double check if there's any questions for you. Beach says thank you, Vic. Coming on.
My pleasure.
Oh, it looks like we have some people, Christians and atheists, arguing on chat. Not arguing, but having a nice conversation.
Can I see chat, or is that not something I can see?
You'll see it in the replay. I couldn't bring it up here, but you'll still start to see it.
Okay.
I'm just trying to see if there's any questions. Being open to change my mind turned me from atheism to Christianity, says Gonzo. Well, there you go.
Well,
it works both ways.
I'm sure it does.
But he wasn't a true atheist, is my guess. Gonzo, you weren't a true atheist. Come on. We all know. If Calvinism is true, you aren't a true atheist. Actually, what I just said. Christian Vik. Oh, here's Joakim. Are you familiar with the Christian views that embrace evolution?
Oh, yeah.
think was evolution a big deal for you in Christianity?
It was. I mean, I kind of like fought against it, kind of, because I was like a young Earth creationist, like I used to be young Earth creationist. Yeah. So I mean, but this was a while ago, and yeah, I don't think. That was definitely something that was. I think more of what was an issue for me was like the contention or the bickering between young Earth and old Earth creationists, and how there was nobody could come to consensus on that. I watched the debate between like Ken Ham and Hugh Ross. I think you can find that on YouTube, and like a bunch of other like Christian pastors and stuff in that debate, and just them arguing about it constantly, and both using different verses to back up what they're saying. And I was just like, are we serious? Like, is this seriously what we're doing right now? It's just really frustrating when we can't get any sort of clarity, even from the leaders. And yeah, I mean, I guess it's good that there's Christians that are accepting evolution. I think that's one of the revolutions that's going to happen in Christianity, like going forward. Like, it's just more and more Christians are going to accept that, and then less and less Christians. The Christians who believe in young Earth creationists are going to move more towards the fringe, hopefully over time. And I think they're kind of more are in that spot more, these days. But
okay, well, stick around. I'm going to close off the live stream. Thank you for coming, and thank everybody in chat for participating. And I'll probably do a video in the next couple of days on I think I'll entitle it "Sermons You'll Never Hear in Church," and then we'll talk about some things we talked about and show some of the slides I showed tonight. But stick around,
that's a good one.
Vic, and I want to talk to you a little bit before you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys, for hanging out in chat. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.